The air in the alley tasted like old garbage and fear. Sarah pressed herself against the cold brick wall, wishing she could just disappear. The flickering neon sign from a bar down the street cast long, dancing shadows, making everything feel even more unreal. She could hear the distinct sound of heavy footsteps approaching, and her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. She knew it. Suddenly, a figure loomed over her, blocking what little light there was. It was Mr. Kim. Everyone in the Korean-American neighborhood knew Mr. Kim, or at least knew of him. His name was whispered with a mix of respect and terror. He was a ghost story parents told their kids to keep them in line, a shadow that hung over their community. He was the boss, the notorious Korean Mafia boss, and he was standing right in front of her. His face, usually a mask of cold indifference, was closer than she ever wanted it to be. His voice, a low whisper that somehow cut through the roaring in her ears, was chilling. "You're in danger. Pretend I'm your dad?" Sarah froze, the words echoing in her head. Her dad? Mr. Kim? Before she could even process it, another group of men rounded the corner, their faces hard and their eyes fixed on her. Their leader, a skinny guy with a sneer permanently etched on his face, stepped forward. "Well, well, look what we have here," he drawled, his gaze lingering on Sarah in a way that made her skin crawl. He took another step, clearly intending to grab her. Then Mr. Kim moved. Without a flicker of hesitation, he placed a large protective hand on Sarah's shoulder. It wasn't gentle, but it wasn't rough either. It was a statement. He squeezed lightly, a silent command for her to play along. His eyes, though, were what really did it. They were fixed on the approaching gang, cold and calculated, holding a warning that was clearer than any words. It was a look that promised pain, hinting at a deeper, more dangerous game at play that only these men understood. Sarah's breath hitched. She was terrified, but something else took over, a strange mix of defiance and instinct. She leaned into Mr. Kim's side, letting her body go a little limp, as if she truly was a scared daughter seeking comfort. She looked up at him, trying to mimic the innocent, trusting gaze a child would give their father. The rival gang leader stopped dead in his tracks. His sneer faltered. He exchanged confused glances with his men. Mr. Kim being there was one thing, but this paternal act? It was completely unexpected. Their aggression seemed to deflate, a balloon slowly losing air. They muttered amongst themselves, clearly bewildered by this sudden turn of events. The leader, his face now a mask of uncertainty, finally just shook his head and motioned for his men to back off. They retreated, disappearing back into the shadows they'd emerged from, leaving Sarah and Mr. Kim alone in the dim alley. Sometimes the most unlikely protectors emerge from the shadows. Sarah felt a strange sense of relief, quickly followed by a fresh wave of panic. Mr. Kim's grip on her shoulder tightened slightly as the rival gang vanished from sight. He leaned in close, his voice barely audible, a chilling undertone to his previous words. "We need to talk. Now." Sarah's eyes were wide, her mind a jumble of confusion and fear. Her life, she knew, had just taken a dramatic and dangerous turn, and she had no idea what was coming next. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Sarah's life up until that moment had been a quiet one, mostly centered around her family's restaurant, in a lively but sometimes tough Korean-American neighborhood in Los Angeles. It was a place bursting with the smell of kimchi and grilled meats, a constant hum of conversation in both English and Korean. Their restaurant wasn't fancy, but it was a cornerstone of the community, a place where generations had celebrated birthdays and mourned losses. Her parents, immigrants who had worked tirelessly, had built it from the ground up, instilling in Sarah a deep respect for hard work and family honor. Growing up, Sarah learned about the importance of community ties, the subtle pressures of maintaining appearances, and the constant dance between holding on to their Korean traditions and fitting into American life. It was a tight-knit world where everyone knew everyone, and small whispers could turn into big problems. There was always this invisible weight of expectation, a push to succeed and to never dishonor the family name. Sarah often felt caught between these two worlds, wanting to respect her parents' sacrifices but also longing for something more. She had a secret ambition, a quiet dream that she rarely spoke about. Sarah wanted to go to art school. She'd spend hours sketching in a worn notebook, filling its pages with faces from the restaurant, landscapes of the city, and abstract shapes that somehow captured her unspoken feelings. Art was her escape, a place where she could truly be herself, away from the demands and expectations. But self-doubt often crept in, a nagging voice telling her it was a foolish dream, impractical and selfish, especially with the financial struggles her family faced. Mr. Kim, in a strange way, had always been a part of this backdrop, a distant, almost mythical figure whose shadow seemed to stretch over their neighborhood. She remembered him, even as a little girl, making occasional unexplained visits to their restaurant. He would come in, usually alone, always well-dressed, and sit at a corner table. His visits were always brief, and they always left a strange, unsettling quiet in their wake. Sarah would watch from the kitchen, sensing the shift in the air, the way her father's shoulders would tighten, the way her mother would hurry to serve him, her movements a little too stiff. There was always an unspoken tension between her father and Mr. Kim, a kind of respectful fear that Sarah, even then, couldn't quite understand. Her father would never talk about it, just wave her off if she asked, telling her to focus on her studies. Lately, though, the financial strain on the restaurant had been growing. Fewer customers, rising costs, and the general struggle of keeping a small business afloat in a big city. Sarah could see the worry lines deepening on her parents' faces, the way they argued in hushed tones late at night. This vulnerability, she realized now, made them susceptible to outside influences, to people like Mr. Kim. She'd heard snippets of conversations, references to favors and help that Mr. Kim had provided in the past. There was this underlying sense, a heavy, unspoken truth, that her family owed him something. It was this deep, quiet debt, this emotional burden that formed the true context for what had just happened in that alley. It wasn't just a random encounter, it was a culmination, a moment where all those years of unspoken fear and obligation finally collided with her own life. The alley incident wasn't just a sudden shock, it was like the final crack in something that had been slowly breaking for years. Sarah realized this as she thought back, piecing together all the little moments when Mr. Kim's influence had chipped away at her family's peace. It wasn't one big explosion, but a slow, insidious erosion. She remembered the time her father had needed a loan to fix the restaurant's failing refrigeration system. Banks weren't lending easily to small businesses then, and her father was desperate. Mr. Kim had appeared almost like magic, offering the money with a smile and a handshake. He called it a favor, a gesture of community support. But that favor came with a hidden price. Suddenly, her father was expected to attend Mr. Kim's private gatherings, to endorse his questionable business partners, and to subtly push the restaurant's vendors towards Mr. Kim's less reputable suppliers. Her father, a man who prided himself on his integrity, had to swallow his pride, his shoulders slumping a little more each time. He would come home late, his eyes tired, the weight of these new obligations pressing down on him. Sarah saw the way Mr. Kim would sometimes visit the restaurant not to eat, but to sit and watch her father, a small smirk playing on his lips, a silent reminder of who was in charge now. It was a veiled humiliation, a way of showing everyone that her father, the respected owner of a community cornerstone, was now just another one of his pawns. Another memory surfaced, a dispute over property lines with a neighboring business. It was a messy, drawn-out affair that threatened to cost them a lot. Again, Mr. Kim stepped in. He resolved the issue quickly and quietly, but soon after, her father was pressured into selling a small, unused plot of land behind the restaurant, a piece that had been in the family for generations, to one of Mr. Kim's associates for a ridiculously low price. It was presented as a fair trade, a way to balance the scales for Mr. Kim's help. But Sarah knew even then that it wasn't fair. It was manipulation, a way for Mr. Kim to slowly expand his reach, always appearing to be the helper while tightening his grip around their necks. He always seemed to be the benefactor, the one doing them a favor, making it incredibly hard to refuse, to say no without appearing ungrateful or disrespectful. This wasn't just about money, it was about guanxi, a concept deeply ingrained in their culture, about connections and relationships. In their community, refusing a favor from someone powerful like Mr. Kim could lead to losing face, to being cut off, to essentially being ostracized. Her parents, especially her father, were bound by these unspoken rules, by the cultural obligation to accept help and, in turn, to provide it when asked. Mr. Kim understood this deeply, and he used it like a weapon, weaving a web of favors and debts that made it almost impossible for her family to escape his influence without causing a huge ripple in their social fabric. To refuse him would not just be saying no to a man, it would be going against the very values that held their community together, risking their reputation and their standing. All these moments, these quiet injustices, these broken promises that had slowly eroded her family's spirit, had built up over the years. The alley incident, with Mr. Kim suddenly stepping in and claiming her as his daughter, wasn't the start of something new, it was the breaking point, the culmination of years of silent suffering and manipulation. It was the moment all those past debts and obligations finally landed squarely on Sarah's own shoulders. The air in Sarah's home became heavy, almost suffocating after the alley incident. Mr. Kim's presence, once a distant, unsettling shadow, now loomed directly over their lives, an oppressive force that seemed to shrink the very rooms they lived in. It was like a thick fog had rolled in, dampening every conversation, chilling every interaction. The quiet, strained silences that used to punctuate family dinners gave way to hushed, intense arguments between her parents. Sarah would often find herself pretending to sleep, straining to catch fragments of their worried whispers from her bedroom. Words like demands, impossible, and Mr. Kim would float through the thin walls, painting a picture of deeper, more dangerous entanglements than she could fully grasp. Her mother's voice, usually so steady, now trembled with fear and frustration. Her father, once the anchor of their family, seemed to be slowly sinking under the weight of unseen burdens. The community, too, shifted. Whispers followed Sarah and her family like a second shadow. The initial shock and confusion over Mr. Kim's public declaration in the alley quickly solidified into judgment. People who once greeted them warmly now offered quick, averted glances. The kind smiles at the market turned into tight, uncomfortable nods. Sarah felt the sting of their unspoken accusations, the fear of being ostracized for their sudden, unwanted association with the notorious Mafia boss. It was as if a scarlet letter had been branded onto their family name, visible only to those who knew the unspoken rules of their tight-knit world. The restaurant, once a bustling hub of laughter and familiar faces, now held an uncomfortable quiet, with fewer regulars daring to cross its threshold. Mr. Kim's visits to the restaurant, once sporadic and unsettling, became alarmingly frequent. He no longer just sat and observed. He made his presence known, his demands more overt, his threats thinly veiled beneath a veneer of polite conversation. He would walk in, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the worn charm of the family eatery, and simply stand, his eyes sweeping over the room, making everyone acutely aware of his power. He would often call Sarah's father into the back office, and the murmurs that followed were not of business, but of intimidation. Sarah herself became a target of his chilling attention. He would sometimes catch her eye across the restaurant, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips, a silent expectation that made her skin crawl. He started making comments, not directly to her, but within earshot, about the importance of family loyalty and how cooperation made things easier for everyone. He spoke of her future, not as her own, but as something he had a say in, something that needed to align with his plans. She felt like a chess piece, constantly being moved without her consent, her life no longer her own. The emotional suffocation was overwhelming. Sarah felt trapped, a fly caught in a spider's web, the silken threads tightening with each passing day. The unspoken fears of her parents, the judgmental stares of the community, and Mr. Kim's relentless pressure pressed down on her, creating a deep sense of helplessness. She spent her nights staring at the ceiling, the weight of their collective burden heavy on her chest. Her art, once her escape, now felt like another impossible dream, a luxury she couldn't afford amidst the growing desperation. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that something had to give. The tension was too high, the pressure too immense. An inevitable rupture was coming, and she had no idea what it would mean for her or her family. Then it happened. One evening, Sarah was helping her mother clean up after a particularly slow day at the restaurant. Her father had gone to the back office, muttering about some paperwork Mr. Kim had dropped off earlier. A few minutes later, she heard a frustrated grunt, then the crinkle of paper. Curiosity mixed with a growing sense of dread pulled her towards the office door. It was slightly ajar. She saw her father hunched over his desk, a stack of documents spread out before him. He was tracing lines on a crude map of their property with a trembling finger, his face pale and drawn. He wants this corner, he mumbled to himself, his voice barely audible. And this, all of it. Sarah pushed the door open a little more, enough to see a name scrawled at the bottom of one of the documents. Kim Holdings, LLC. Her heart started to pound. She recognized the name from the few times she'd overheard her parents talking about Mr. Kim's other businesses. But this was different. This wasn't about a loan or a favor. This was about their restaurant. This was about their home. She crept closer, her eyes scanning the papers. There were financial statements, legal clauses she didn't fully understand, but one thing was crystal clear. Mr. Kim wasn't just lending them money or helping them out. He was systematically driving their restaurant into the ground, creating debt, and setting them up to lose everything so he could take over their property. He planned to use their prime location for something called new development, which, given his reputation, could only mean some kind of illegal operation. The favors, the help, the protection, it was all a calculated scheme to steal their family's legacy. A cold wave of anger, sharp and clear, washed over her, pushing aside the fear that had been her constant companion, betrayal. It was a raw, burning feeling. Her family had trusted him, or at least been cornered into trusting him, and he had been playing them for fools the entire time. This wasn't just about money. It was about their dignity, their history, their very existence. In that moment, something inside Sarah snapped. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was furious, and that fury gave her a strength she hadn't known she possessed. She decided then and there that she would expose him, no matter the cost. Mr. Kim, as if sensing her shift, became even more brazen. His threats, once veiled, now focused on her younger sister, Mina. He remarked casually during one of his visits that Mina was growing into a beautiful young woman, and that it would be a shame if anything were to happen to her. He spoke of opportunities for young girls, his eyes lingering on Mina for just a moment too long. This was a line he had never dared to cross before, a sacred boundary broken. The protective fury that had ignited in Sarah now blazed into an inferno. He had messed with her family, her parents, her home. But her sister? That was unforgivable. It was just a few days later, while she was delivering a takeout order to an old apartment building a few blocks away, that she literally bumped into a man she recognized. He was a regular at their restaurant, always ordering the same beef bulgogi, always sitting alone at the counter, observing quietly. He was a kind-faced older gentleman with a gentle demeanor, usually lost in thought. His name was Mr. Lee. He apologized, picking up the fallen containers, and noticed her distress. "Everything all right, Sarah?" he asked, his voice soft but knowing. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Tears welled up in her eyes. The dam of her composure broke. She didn't mean to, but the words tumbled out, a torrent of fear, anger, and desperation. She told him everything about Mr. Kim, the documents, the threats, the feeling of being trapped. Mr. Lee listened, his expression grave, his eyes fixed on hers. When she finished, he simply nodded slowly. "I know Mr. Kim," he said, his voice low. "I've been watching him for years. Retired police detective. He's a slippery one, but he always leaves a trail. Maybe, just maybe, we can finally do something about it." A glimmer of hope, fragile but real, appeared in the darkness that had enveloped her. This unexpected conversation, this chance encounter, was more than just a coincidence. It was an opportunity. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a spark of agency. She wasn't just waiting for something to happen to her anymore. She was going to make something happen. The story, her story, was no longer about being a victim. It was about fighting back. The immediate aftermath of her confession to Mr. Lee was a blur of conflicting emotions for Sarah. Fear, a familiar chill, still clung to her, a constant reminder of Mr. Kim's reach. But beneath it, a new feeling stirred, a strange mix of guilt and empowerment. Guilt, because she had dragged an outsider into her family's dangerous mess, and empowerment, because for the first time, she wasn't just reacting, she was acting. The decision to expose Mr. Kim felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying but also exhilarating in its finality. Her parents' reaction was exactly what she expected, yet somehow worse. When she cautiously told them about Mr. Lee, about the documents she found, and her plan, fury erupted. Her father, his face pale with a mix of anger and terror, shouted about dishonor, about bringing shame upon their family. Her mother wept, pleading with Sarah to leave things alone, to not stir up trouble, to just survive. The fear in their eyes was palpable, a reflection of years of quiet submission to Mr. Kim's insidious control. It wasn't until Mr. Lee, with his calm demeanor and clear explanation of the evidence, laid out Mr. Kim's systematic scheme to take their property that a shift began. Slowly, agonizingly, their resistance softened. The betrayal was too deep, too calculated to ignore. The fear remained, but a desperate, fragile hope began to surface, mixed with a profound sense of exhaustion from years of silent suffering. They reluctantly, fearfully, agreed to support Sarah, their trust in her a heavy burden and a powerful motivator. Mr. Lee, the retired detective, became her anchor. He was patient, methodical, and surprisingly gentle. He guided her through the labyrinthine world of evidence gathering, explaining legal terms, showing her how to document everything without drawing suspicion. He taught her to look for patterns, to connect the subtle threads of Mr. Kim's operations. He was more than just an ally. He was a mentor, a steady hand in a storm. He understood the cultural nuances, the unspoken rules that had trapped her family for so long, and helped her navigate them. The Korean community, usually so unified, became sharply divided. Whispers turned into open arguments. Some families, those who had also suffered under Mr. Kim's thumb, quietly rallied around Sarah's family, offering support, food, and guarded words of encouragement. They saw her fight as their own, a chance for justice they had long given up on. But many others, paralyzed by fear of retaliation, distanced themselves. They avoided the restaurant, averted their eyes when they saw Sarah, and spoke in hushed tones about the trouble she was causing. The pressure to maintain harmony, a deeply ingrained cultural value, clashed violently with the desperate need for justice. Sarah felt the weight of their judgment, but the memory of Mina's innocent face, the thought of Mr. Kim's lingering gaze, kept her resolve firm. Psychologically, Sarah was a mess. Intense anxiety became her shadow. Every unfamiliar car, every late-night phone call sent a jolt of paranoia through her. She struggled with moments of despair, questioning if she had done the right thing, if she was strong enough to see it through. The moral implications of her actions weighed heavily. Was she tearing apart her community? Was she endangering everyone she loved? But each time doubt crept in, the image of her family's restaurant, the heart of their life, being stolen by Mr. Kim, solidified her purpose. Her resolve to protect them, to reclaim their dignity, remained unwavering. Mr. Kim, sensing her defiance, intensified his surveillance. She noticed his men more often, lurking near the restaurant, following her home. Anonymous phone calls, filled with heavy breathing and implied threats, became common. His attempts to intimidate her escalated, making her daily life a constant tightrope walk. Every step felt calculated, every interaction loaded with unspoken danger. The game had changed. It was no longer just about survival, it was about outsmarting a predator. Sarah, with Detective Lee's unwavering guidance, meticulously pieced together the fragments of Mr. Kim's empire. It was a painstaking process. Late nights spent poring over documents, cross-referencing names, and connecting seemingly unrelated transactions. Detective Lee, with his years of experience, taught her how to build a case, how to find the cracks in Mr. Kim's seemingly impenetrable facade. They gathered bank statements, shell company registrations, and testimonies from other victims who, emboldened by Sarah's courage, finally dared to speak up. The evidence mounted, painting a clear picture of systematic exploitation, extortion, and money laundering, all designed to slowly choke out legitimate businesses like her family's restaurant. The detective presented their findings to a special task force. The sheer volume and irrefutable nature of the evidence left no room for doubt. It revealed Mr. Kim's criminal enterprise stretching far beyond their small community, affecting countless lives. The task force, having long suspected Mr. Kim but lacking concrete proof, moved swiftly and decisively. One crisp morning, the quiet of the neighborhood was shattered by the wail of sirens. A dramatic police raid descended upon Mr. Kim's various establishments, including his main office, which Sarah had helped pinpoint. Helicopters hovered overhead, and uniformed officers swarmed the streets. Mr. Kim, caught completely off guard, was arrested. His reign of terror brought to a definitive end. The news spread like wildfire through the community. A mixture of disbelief, relief, and a profound sense of justice washing over everyone. He faced multiple charges, his power crumbling under the weight of the truth. In the aftermath, the community slowly began to heal. The weight of fear that had stifled their lives for so long began to lift. Sarah's family restaurant, once on the brink of collapse, was saved. The local community, witnessing Sarah's bravery and the downfall of their oppressor, rallied around them, making sure the restaurant thrived once more. It became a symbol of resilience, a place where people could gather, not in fear, but in fellowship. Sarah, though scarred by the ordeal, emerged stronger, more confident, and with a voice she never knew she possessed. The trauma of those months left its mark, a quiet understanding of the darker corners of the world, but it also ignited a fierce fire within her. She finally pursued her dream of art school. Her experiences, the fear, the betrayal, the fight for justice, all fueled her creative expression. Her art became raw, powerful, filled with an emotional depth that resonated with everyone who saw it. It was no longer just a private escape, it was a testament to her journey. The outcome, while not without its lingering shadows, was satisfyingly realistic. Justice, Sarah learned, was not a swift, clean process. It was messy, terrifying, and demanded immense courage. But it could be achieved. True strength, she realized, didn't come from avoiding danger, but from confronting it, from finding her voice even when it trembled. The whispered words, "Pretend I'm your dad," ironically became the catalyst for her own liberation. Mr. Kim, in his attempt to control her, had inadvertently set her free. She had found her power not in pretending to be someone's daughter, but in becoming her own hero. The future, once a source of dread, now stretched before her, an open canvas waiting for her to paint her own destiny. She was no longer a victim, she was a survivor, an artist, and a testament to the enduring power of hope and community.